Minutes before the hour, and Mike Landers, candidate for City Council District 1, joins us. And Mike, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Jimmy. It's always a pleasure to be with you. I've been on your show several times, and I always leave having a good feeling about being here.
Well, we hope that's the case today. You decided to run for City Council a while back. It wasn't just something that just popped up.
I did, Jimmy Dale. The reason that I made the decision early, and I really made the decision about 2 years ago, is I began to hear from people in my neighborhood that were concerned that City Council wasn't responsive to their needs, and that they were making phone calls about issues such as drainage issues and such as nuisance issues in the community and the neighborhood, and they didn't seem to be getting the response they wanted. And of course, they knew that I had some interest in the job, and naturally they began to talk to me. And actually, I tried to find one of my neighbors that I thought ought to run for City Council. And my neighbors, being business people and this sort of thing, they said, you know, Mike, we know we need to make a change, but we don't want to be the one that steps out front. Well, as you know, I'm retired and Pam is retired, and we had the time, and I just felt like public service was a platform I ought to look at, because, you know, when you have time and you have interest in a project, and I see the Sylacauga City Council as a project, then you really need to commit yourself. And that's what I've done by declaring my candidacy. I've committed to serve the people of District 1, but not just District 1, all of Sylacauga. And that's what I want to do, is offer real service, real thoughtful leadership, and try to get some things done in Sylacauga that I think haven't been done. I noticed that you had Mr. Heigl on your show, and you talked with him just like you're talking with me, but he and I have a vastly different view. Mr. Heigl said there wasn't anything that needed to be changed in Sylacauga. He said that if it's not broken, you don't fix it. Well, in my opinion, there's several things in Sylacauga that are broken. We've got to get a better handle on our budget, for one thing, down there. You know, we are critically low in reserve funds. I don't know if you were aware of that or not. We have about 3 months operating expenses in reserve. You know, the city of Sylacauga is a big business. We have a budget of about $13 million. We had at one time reserves in excess of $10 million. Now, depending on who you ask, you can be told right now that we have reserves in excess of $6 or $7 million. That's true, but certain of those reserves are restricted funds. Some of those reserves belong to the Board of Education. They're ad valorem taxes that have been collected and not dispensed and dispersed. So in reality, we're less than $4 million in cash reserves in Sylacauga. If you think about it in terms of budgeting and expenses, that's about 3 months of operating capital. That's not a good position for us to be in Sylacauga. Then, of course, as you know, you have talked to people as I've talked to people, and there are folks out there that want some changes. Now, we just went through some paving, but there's a lot more paving that needs to be done. For years, this council has talked about doing something about improving our sports facilities for our children. It comes up every time at election time, and then it dies, and you know that, Jimmy Dale. It never seems to get any legs under it. And this council has been the same. We're facing a major expense with renovating Legion Stadium down there. The stadium is in many ways unsafe. If you've ever worked down there, and I know your children are grown, but you know, I have a son that's a senior at Sylacauga High School. When it's raining and you're in the concession area, you know, you kind of hate to reach for anything electrical because there's water running over the top of your shoe. So that's got to be faced. And of course, another thing, Jimmy Dale, is we have maintained our budget with no growth, but the way we've done that is we have not filled positions when folks left the employment of the city of Sylacauga. You know, we might not have a city engineer, but yet we're trying to make something else work out. We didn't have a nuisance control officer for a long time. We didn't have an animal control officer. Well, we can't continue to balance our budget on the back of the help at City Hall and say, well, we're just not going to fill this position, because you know what happens? Every time you don't fill a position, there's less service for the folks that are paying the bills, the taxpayers and the voters, and we've got to get away from that.
There are lots of questions. You brought up several of those issues this morning. What's the answer to some of them?
Well, quite simply, the answer is that the council has got to get, as we would say in the country, they got to man up, and they've got to face these issues. They have got to do more cautious budgeting. They have got to learn to say no sometimes when folks come by and ask for money. You know, the core services of the city of Sylacauga are police, fire, you have to have administration to collect taxes, then you've got streets and sanitation. Now, beyond that, you've got some more what I call children of the city council, and that would include Parks and Rec, and that would include the library, and we're committed to fund those. And I'm going to tell you what, in my opinion, we get more bang for the bucks that we spend in so many ways on the library and on the Parks and Rec, because, and I know nobody likes this term anymore, it's almost a cliche, but quality of life. Those truly are. Those two things, coupled with the fact that Sylacauga has always been a shining star in the education field. Our schools have always been second to none. You know, years ago, Jimmy Dale, when folks mentioned Mountain Brook schools or they mentioned Vestavia schools, they mentioned Sylacauga schools in the same voice. That's long been a great sense of pride, and we've got to continue to fund education. We have got to, and we're doing a good thing right now. You know, we're renovating the school down there. Our other schools have been brought up to date, but we've got to make a commitment that we're going to do the things and fund the things to make classroom instruction effective. We've got to give our teachers the tools they need, whether it's technology or whether it's chalk and ink. We've got to do that. And so I just see that we have so many opportunities to fix things, but we're not fixing them.
New business, jobs, that's on the plate of everybody in the conversation you have.
Jimmy, you know, we've lost jobs due to a shift that has been global as far as the textile industry. The textile industry was one of those industries that was destined to go away. But we have not replaced those jobs. Now, we're lucky that we've got one Tier 1 supplier to the Honda plant, which is 30 miles up the road, and that's Fleetwood Metals. But I look and I wonder why we don't have more of those folks here. You know, there are a lot of jobs that support Honda in terms of manufacturing components that are used in the automobile industry, but we didn't get those folks here like we should have. And you know, right down the road in Montgomery, which is certainly not out of the range of shipping parts, there's Hyundai. There's Mercedes-Benz right down the road at Vance. We didn't get any of those Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 suppliers to support the auto industry. And we've got the Honda plant right here in the county. We have got to be more progressive. We've got to be more proactive. We have got to do a better job selling Sylacauga. That's what it's all about. We're not just competing now with Talladega or Childersburg. We're competing with the entire state. We've got to go after those jobs. We've got to make it amenable to those folks coming here. We have got to be more concerned about creating jobs than we have creating more retail opportunities out on Highway 280. I can tell you, Jimmy, and you know it, it's elemental. I grew up in a country store down there at Fayetteville. You know, knew your family. A lot of the Abrams were down there. But the one thing I knew is that if folks had a job and they had money to spend, they would spend it. They'll spend it locally. But we don't have the jobs. Quite naturally, we don't have the cash flow in our community to support more retail. If there was a need for more retail, there'd be folks out there building. We have spent, and you know this, we've gone through with the Drinkards, and that didn't work out on developing the city's 280 property, and then we of course got affiliated with Retail Specialists, and that didn't work out. And you know, sometimes you get to throwing good money after bad, Jimmy Dale. We spent a lot of money out there on experts and lawyers to try to create a project that just it wasn't ready. And if we focus that much energy on creating jobs, we might have already had some jobs here.
You, of course, we're talking with Mike Landers, candidate for City Council District 1 in the August 28th municipal elections. you have followed this. I mean, it's not like that, hey, you're just sitting down there this morning and throwing out stuff. You've kept up, you've been involved with the process, and you've been involved in the process and really no dog in the hunt, per se, as far as a leadership position in the city of Sylacauga, just concerned for this city.
Well, you know, we have our youngest child, who is Chase, and, you know, I got to get a plug in for him. He's a starting linebacker with the Aggies football this year. But Chase is a senior at Sylacauga High School. Well, what I'd like to do is create a legacy in Sylacauga where our kids that leave and go to college could come back and raise their families. Now, right now, there are no jobs for them to come back to. And that's a real issue with me. You've heard the term brain drain. Well, we've got a youth drain here. Our kids leave here. They get a degree, they get educated, they want to start a career, and they want to go out in the world, and there's not an opportunity here for them. I'd like to see that change. You know, I have been in the Sylacauga area all my life, 56 years, and grew up down that Fayetteville, but, you know, Fayetteville's, when I grew up, was a small place, but we always came to town. I've loved Sylacauga. I love Sylacauga as a community that's healthy for families. But we've got to sell that aspect of our life too. You know, when Andy Griffith died, you know, I watched on TV and it was almost like somebody I knew had gone. But you look around and take, for instance, Mount Laurel over in near Birmingham. Those folks have bought into Mount Laurel as a community because they're looking for what we have right here. They're looking for that Mayberry field. When you ride through this downtown, nobody that rides through here can help but feel some sense of nostalgia. We need to market downtown. There's a lot of potential for growth downtown. There's a lot of potential to draw people in downtown because truly we have a state-of-the-art library. Shirley Spears has done a fantastic job with that. Jim Armstrong with Parks and Rec has done a great job. And I'll tell you another agency that gets largely funds themselves with some significant help from the city of Sylacauga is Margaret Morton's SAFE organization. You know, in these tough economic times that we've had, SAFE has been a safety net for a lot of people in the community. So we've got a platform of public service there. But it seems like that the folks that work for the city of Sylacauga are committed to that. Maybe the council is not as committed as they should be. There are several things, as I say, that I see in Sylacauga that are broken. And I'm not, when I say vote for Mike Landers for change for a better Sylacauga, that's not just a cliche. I'm willing to roll up my sleeves, I'm willing to work, I'm willing to make the tough decisions that we need to make to get Sylacauga going. You know, the time of just sitting back and saying, I hope this happens or I hope that happens, we've about hoped ourselves out of business. You know, you've got to marry that hope and that ambition with action. And that's what we haven't done. And we've had some failings in leadership. You know, it's just time that folks step up.
There'll be a new mayor elected. Several council positions are being vacated due to those candidates running for mayor. When you decided to run for this position in District 1, you had a plan.
I do have a plan.
And that plan is what you're promoting for change. Am I correct?
That's absolutely right. And the plan, Jimmy Dale, is simple. The plan is to get back to the core issues that make any community a good community. First is we've got to maintain the things that we have that are working right. And by that I said the Parks and Rec, by that I said the library, by that I said SAFE, and certainly education. You know, education, I'm a product of public education, you're a product. You know, I graduated right down that Fayetteville High School, went on to the University of Alabama, got a graduate degree, undergraduate and graduate degree at the University of Alabama. So I certainly am a strong believer in public education. I'm a strong believer in the quality of the education that we have in Sylacauga and has long been a history and a tradition in Sylacauga. I want to maintain that. We have a police department and a fire department, and I'm going to tell you, I talk to Chief Missildine with the fire department regularly. I talk to Chief Carden regularly, and they're both young men that have an ambition to make their departments as good as they can be, and I think they're doing it. So then we get down to the council. The council is not doing its job. The council has been unwilling to make the tough decisions about budgeting, the tough decisions about which way we want to focus our energies towards growth. And we have talked so much about retail, and when I say retail, I mean trying to bring large-scale retail out on 280 on that 36 acres that the city owns out there. I'm 100% for supporting our local businesses, like your business. Mm-hmm. You know, we need to appreciate the folks we got. You know, it's easy to take for granted the folks that are here that are working 2 and 3 and 4 and 10 employees, and say, well, you know, y'all are doing okay. What do y'all need from us? That's not the way I think. You folks, you small businesses right down Broadway and right down Main here, you know, y'all are just as important to me as Walmart is. I figure Walmart's got folks on their payroll taking care of them. You guys need to be aware, or the city needs to be aware of the issues that y'all face. And we need to make sure that there aren't any roadblocks to your growth and your progress. And I just get frustrated because if you've been to council meetings, and I know you have, there seems to be any number of different directions that the council seems to pull itself. To me, that reflects a lack of leadership, and I'll tell you why. The man with the gavel and the man that sits there that can set the agenda, he needs to focus that council and move them in one direction. And I've seen it time after time, and you've seen it. There are competing interests up there. There is almost a divisiveness among the council. If I'm elected, I can tell you that we will do our very best to draw everybody together for a common purpose. And we're going to stop wandering into these problems that we know we can't manage. And the city has got to stop taking on everybody else's responsibility.
You're not afraid of challenges.
Oh, and I'm not afraid to say what I think. You know, I've always been one of those folks, Jimmy Dale, that if you asked for my opinion, I just assumed that you wanted it. And I'm going to give it to you. And I'm going to give you the best answer that I know how to give that's true and to the point and reflects where we really are. You know, you can't make plans in your own life if you don't have a goal and if you don't make an honest and realistic assessment of where you are. That's one of the things that I think has failed to happen in many ways. We just, as a governing body, the council has just said, well, let's just let that float. We're not going to worry about that. Or, well, let's give them a little money. Let's don't worry about the big picture. Well, the time for that's over. You know, in good times, at your house, my house, and in your business, in good times, you can spend all you want to.
Money's a little freer, isn't it?
It sure is. But now we've gotten to a critical stage in Sylacauga when you have basically 3 months in reserve, and in the economy like it is, and you know, this council has had some problems too, in that we almost budget opposite the way we need to budget. We need to review every item. Just because somebody was budgeted X number of dollars last year, that doesn't mean that we need to give them that much this year. Also, conversely, we don't need to say we need to cut every agency 3%. We've done that. Well, there's some agencies that could stand a 3% cut. There's some that can't. There's some that actually deserved an increase in revenue based on the productivity of that particular agency. But that's not the way we do it. We take a knife and you know, it's more like a surgeon working on, it ought to be more like a surgeon working on that budget, but it ends up like a butcher working on it.
You have mentioned a number of entities that play a key role in the success of Sylacauga, SAFE, the library, and others. Coosa Valley Medical Center, the largest employer in our city, just adding the cath lab next month. And I know healthcare is so important when businesses look to relocate to an area.
Well, you know, Jimmy Dale, that, and I don't know if you attended a couple of weeks ago, but Jesse Cleveland, who our former mayor is chairman of the hospital board. You know, Jesse single-handedly spearheaded on behalf of the hospital a men's health awareness program that was held over at Harvey's. And I attended, and it was such a good community event because it brought 150 men together, and Coosa Valley Medical Center reached out to talk specifically about men's issues. And, you know, men don't always take the best care of their health, and we don't watch. And so I thought that was such a good outreach. I talked to Glenn Sisk that night, the administrator at the hospital, and I talked to Vanessa Green, and I talked to Jesse, and I told them that's the kind of partnerships we need with the city of Sylacauga. You know, it is our largest employer, and it is becoming a state-of-the-art health facility. You know, we're going to be able to get a stent in Sylacauga instead of having to go to Birmingham to get one. It's a full-service hospital, and it has been a long-time friend of the community, and I support that hospital's operations 100%. They're good folks up there. It's well managed. They have gone through some difficult times in these shifting medical climate with changes in reimbursement, but they're doing well. They're on sound financial footing. And of course, you know, the city has a connection because the city appoints the hospital board. And I can tell you that that's one of those agencies, as I mentioned the others, that's doing a good job. And it truly is one of the things that doesn't need to be fixed as far as the city's role in it. And another agency that we kind of treat like a stepchild, but if you've been down there, it's a wonderful stop, and I encourage you to go there, is the library. Not the library, but the museum. If you'll go by the museum and talk to Donna Renfro, you know, I hope that the future financial picture for the city improves because they need some real funding down there because they're preserving our heritage in Sylacauga, and that's one of those things that I think is important. You know, the only way you don't repeat the things that you did wrong in the past is to remember those. You know, it's like my daddy used to say, if you sat on a hot stove once, you probably won't sit on it again, but if you do, you're just crazy. Well, you know, we don't need to let the past get away from us. The past is very important in predicting the future. What we've done in the past tells us what we're going to do in the future. And so I see so many things that I'd like to change and that I'd like to work on. And I think the voters feel that way. You know, as I've traveled around and every neighborhood in my community, I have stopped and talked with folks. And I'll tell you what, Jimmy Dale, you know, this campaign thing, I hear folks say, oh man, that's hard work and that's hot work. Yeah, it's hard work and it's hot work. But let me tell you what the most rewarding thing is. I was out in Fairmont the other day. And man, you know, me being a big boy, I was sweating like a hog. I had my sweat rag and I was wiping and I had a bottle of water stuffed in my pocket and I had my hands full of my literature and I walked up to the door and a little lady that I'm going to guess she was well into her 70s, maybe her 80s, she came to the door and she said, what can I do for you? And I said, well, I'm Mike Landers and I'm campaigning for City Council District 1. And she said, well, it's mighty hot out there. And I said, yes, ma'am, it is mighty hot. And I said, a big old boy like me, it's real hot. And she said, well, let me get you a drink of water. And I said, well, I appreciate that. So she comes back and she says, you know, I just cut off some corn. I'm fixing to cook it. And I said, well, that sounds good. And she said, I've already got the squash cooked and I've made some cornbread. And I said, yes, ma'am. And I'm thinking now if there was only a tater pie or some banana pudding. And she says, and I've got a coconut pie left over. And I said, yes, ma'am. I said, when I get through with this, if I ain't too hot, I'm going to go somewhere and eat. And she said, well, why don't you eat here because I want to ask you something. Well, I did eat with her. And what her concern was is what the future of Sylacauga held for the young people. She wanted to know because she had grandchildren that visited her from out of state. And she said, you know, I want to know what these children in the future will have, not just my grandchildren, but other folks' children, because she said, you know, I'm old and I don't need sports facilities and I don't need this, but she said Sylacauga needs it. And I said, yes, ma'am, you're right. So it surprises you, Jimmy, sometimes what you can learn if you will talk to the people. You know, I would have thought of all the issues that lady had. I thought she might have a drainage issue or she might have a complaint about garbage service or whatever. That wasn't true. Her issue was doing something for the younger folks.
And the future of Sylacauga will be on the agenda as the voters go to the poll and vote for city council and mayorship in the August 28th municipal election. Mike, always a pleasure, and thanks for dropping by this morning.
Jimmy Dale, I've enjoyed it, and you know, you and I, as I said, we come from a very similar place. You know, I knew a lot of Abrams down there at Fayetteville, a lot of good folks coming up in the old days. I miss that. But you know what? I've been in Sylacauga, and we moved to Sylacauga several years ago because my mother was ill, and we needed to be closer to the doctor and closer to the pharmacy. And Chase was already in school here. And I'm telling you what, Sylacauga has got the greatest people in the world. They deserve better than they've had in terms of leadership and in terms of government. And if they vote for me, a vote for Mike Landers really is a change for a better Sylacauga. And I'm asking every one of you that are watching to consider my candidacy for District 1. I won't disappoint you. You'll have access, you'll have open meetings, and you can talk to me. And I promise you that I'll give you my very best efforts.
More coming up on Daybreak in just a minute.